Prime Minister, what I noticed with this situation, though, is that we need to be more proactive in advance of these events to ensure the infrastructure is in a condition that it can handle these events. We have too many drains and gullies where remedial work, sometimes the gully walls have collapsed, they haven't been fixed, they're blocked as a result, and then water comes down, flows into adjoining communities. These situations we must be proactive for. We should also look, when we are entering a hurricane season, look at having relief and provisioning and equipment distributed into strategic locations in advance, so that if there are hits, we can get relief to people quickly. So the issue of resilience also applies to the JPS system. We saw many instances of poles which had been impacted by trees and so on, and that's a maintenance problem, obviously. But there are also instances of poles which have just collapsed because they were insufficiently anchored. So when I'm hoping that JPS, in rebuilding its distribution system in those areas which are badly affected, will take into account where there has been weaknesses in the arrangement and build into the replacement of those assets, a greater concern about the resilience of the posts and so on. Mr. Speaker, communities which are at risk, we need to bring some attention to those communities. In the corporate area, New Haven, for example, the Dehaney River needs to be desilted. The drains that are feeding into that need to be looked at. There are some engineering issues which need to be fixed to prevent flooding, so those communities don't have to endure such regular flood conditions. It's one thing to have a multi-layered fiscal protection, which is essentially what the government has over time been building out. But we also need to have, before the event, expenditures to provide some balance so that we don't have as much disruption to people's lives by avoidable damage which had the necessary infrastructural arrangements, the cleaning of drains, the fixing of drains and gully walls and so on. Had those things been done, then we wouldn't have suffered quite as much damage in those areas. So we need some balance in our approach to be proactive and have those programs being done methodically and on a regular basis, and also on the back end, those measures, those reserves, those financial instruments and so on that ensure that the budget can sustain the remedial work, which you've done a lot to address, Minister of Finance. I was hoping to hear from you today on the financing of the restoration. We've heard that the $4.5 billion in the contingency and disaster fund is available. We've heard the $2.5 million under the CRIF policy. We've heard that the CAT bond will not be triggered. So we've also heard that the NWA is estimating $10.5 billion worth of damage just to main roads alone, preliminarily to main roads alone. And we know that there are at least 1,000 homes, and maybe a bigger number, it's more than that, that are going to need support from the state for people to get going. So one has to, I would love to have heard how you plan to utilize those funds. Given that we're so early in the season, yeah, it's early, but I'm saying we're early in the season, and we have to make a decision to what extent you're going to spend your equity, so to speak, the cash that you have set aside now, and hope that there isn't another one, or you're going to say, well, we're going to have to keep something back because there may be more, and we can't spend everything now on that. So these are the kind of decisions that, as Minister, with the facts available to you, we in the opposition and the wider public want to hear what those decisions are, what the thinking is behind them, and so on. The bulk of the funding that's available above the $7 million that is debt. The $7 billion is debt, which is the contingent claim arrangement that you have, which is like a 25-year loan, I think. So we are going to see the need to borrow some of the funding that we are going to have to spend on this, unless we're going to decide, not to address the needs of the population, which is not I don't think we can do that. We have to make sure that people receive the sufficient support to get themselves back on their feet. From our perspective as an opposition, Prime Minister, colleagues, we commit ourselves to being part of the solution. We want to, as members of Parliament, play the role that we are already playing in trying to ease some of the pressures on our constituents, using the resources that have been made available through the CDF system. And generally speaking, while we may be critical of some issues, it is where we see things that are falling short and which need to be called out so that adjustments can be made, improvements can be made, things can be fixed. Because we're out there too, we're seeing things, you're seeing things. But it's all in the spirit of trying to get Jamaica beyond this present disaster and get our lives back in order again. So Prime Minister, as long as the process of relief distribution is done transparently and equitably, we will be partners in trying to bring the lives of our people back to where daily living is no longer the struggle that it is now for those people who are affected, and people can be comfortable again. Thank you, comrades.
Member from Southeast St. Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, I want to follow up from the opposition leader related to the issue of financing. We have $2.5 billion from the CRIF facility, and I want to acknowledge the work that our predecessors, Omar Davis in particular, did on this to initiate it so that we can benefit from it. We have $4.5 billion. We have $4.5 billion from the NDF and the contingency fund. I want some clarity on the National Disaster Fund. When we were here a couple of weeks ago, you had indicated that to trigger access to that fund, the damage would have to total 1.5% of GDP. By my estimate, that's about 45 billion and would have to be confirmed by the Fiscal Commissioner. So the 4.5, which you have indicated that is currently available, is that a drawdown from the NDF? And what I also want to know is, has the work from the Fiscal Commissioner started to determine whether we are going to get to the 1.5%? I know we're not there yet because all estimates wouldn't be in place, but anecdotally, I believe we will possibly get there to 1.5%. Thirdly, in relation to the NDF, when we were here a couple of weeks ago, you had also indicated that it would act as a fund that would also deal with non-governmental donations and contributions when disasters happen. So I want to know whether the NDF is going to play that role. I know where the ODPM is dealing with some fundraising, but would the National Disaster Fund play any role in coordinating other fundraising, whether from countries, donor agencies, etc., and what would be the mechanism for the management of those funds once they come in to the NDF? And then finally, I want to ask you about the Cat 5 bond. We know it hasn't been, sorry. I'm asking the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister can consult with whoever he wishes to. Sorry. With the Cat 5 bond, I know it was not triggered now. The question I would ask is, was there an option to expand the coverage related to the bond, which may have necessitated paying a higher premium? It also possibly, I don't know whether there would have been takers for the bond, but was that option explored? And also whether the bond facilitates multiple payouts, meaning if you have an activity, God forbid we don't have it, but if we have it 2 months down the road and then another one next year, would the Cat 5 bond facilitate multiple payouts in a given time period? My understanding is that we have it until, and you can clarify, 2026, I believe, or 2027. So during that period, if we have more than one event, would we benefit from the payout if we meet the threshold? So those are my questions.
Most Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me start with the member from. So I was going to take off the two questions. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will start with the member from Southeast St. Andrew. His questions first, relating to the NDF and the CAT bond. Member, I'm going to task the Minister of Finance to respond to you on the specific and technical questions that you have asked on the bond. In fact, at the next sitting, we're at the next sitting, House Leader, next Tuesday. So we will give you those answers. You may, however, hear those answers in the press before when we speak. As it relates to the funding going to the ODPEM, as it is now, it is quite likely that all the funds donated and used, well, all the funds donated will be used in the relief, in the immediate relief. It is unlikely that there would be any reserve to be put to the NDF, the disaster fund. No. So the funds that come to the ODPEM would be managed by the ODPEM and distributed to the relevant entities and agencies and used in the relief exercise right away. In terms of the questions raised by the Leader of the Opposition, we didn't say this, but it's important that it is said, and I'm happy you've asked the question. Before the hurricane, we spent $188 million on preparation. This is the NWA. On drain cleaning, we spent $20 million at the Sandy Gully. The Member of Parliament for Western St. Andrew, for which you toured, would verify that expense. But it did work. So I just so that the country, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Members, please, members. Members, South St. Catherine. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I am not trying to in any way diminish the general point being made by the Leader of the Opposition, which is that greater expenditure in preparing for a natural disaster is something that any government must undertake. Right. But I wouldn't want the impression to be given that no preparation was made. Right? In fact, the government undertook significant preparation. And in any event, you know, there are areas which historically, if not cleaned, if not opened up, would cause flooding. And those areas, Mr. Speaker, those areas were addressed. In addition, all members of Parliament were allocated drain cleaning for their constituency just before the event. And I'm certain that most of them undertook the work and they found that it was meaningful in preventing. As little as it is, it can open a drain, and that is important. The reference by the Leader of the Opposition to the maintenance of the national grid, particularly the distribution network, is something that we have to pay attention to. The JPS is required to submit to the OUR, I believe it would be, and to the Minister of Energy, their hurricane preparation plan and their maintenance plan. A far more rigorous review of those plans would be undertaken to ensure that the grid, which is a national infrastructure, is in a position to withstand hurricanes or other weather events. It is critical, and so I agree that greater attention should be paid to that. Just an observation, Mr. Speaker, in response to the questions of the Leader of the Opposition. At some point, the country has to accept that it is only with robust economic growth that we are going to turn the things we wish for into reality. Madam Speaker, we stand here not just for this disaster. I've been in this House now for 26 years and been through a few of them, and every time we stand up, it's the same thing. Government should have prepositioned. Government should have spent more. The challenge is, Mr. Speaker, as every member of Parliament in here knows, the government, whichever government it is, they just don't have it. The budget is just not there. So what is it that we should be focusing on, whether it is government or opposition? Let us focus on growing the economy. That is the focus. Building resilience, yes, is part of how we're going to grow the economy. So it's important that when we speak, the message that comes from here to the lady who was shedding tears in that district in Bull Savannah in St. Elizabeth, where she lost her home, that the message is that, yes, the immediate sympathy and response will be there, but the government is also working to ensure that this does not repeat itself, that we break this cycle of lack of resources to build resilience so we can withstand shocks. That's really the very first time that any government has actually taken this on. A deliberate and instrumental attempt at building resilience and growth in our economy. And I think that must be the message that leaves this debate to the people who are expecting the support and relief from the government. You are going to get the support, you are going to get the relief, but the government is also going to strengthen you and give you the endurance and the resilience to withstand future shocks, which, if it is one thing that is certain, there is going to be another future shock. To build resilience so we can withstand shocks. That's really the very first time that any government has actually taken this on. A deliberate and instrumental attempt at building resilience and growth in our economy. And I think that must be the message that leaves this debate to the people who are expecting the support and relief from the government. You are going to get the support, you are going to get the relief, but the government is also going to strengthen you and give you the endurance and the resilience to withstand future shocks, which, if it is one thing that is certain, there is going to be another future shock.
Member of St. Andrew Western.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, do you agree that there are some strategic and critical infrastructure for which the vulnerability of which, if we don't invest and address them prior to a hurricane, will further undermine our economy, and that the Sandy Gully forms part of that network that needs to be addressed, and that for years we've been pleading and begging, way before Beryl even was formed or was even in any conception, and that nothing has been done to address the situation with respect to the Sandy Gully, except in the upper reaches of Sandy Gully, which is where the problem does not exist. The problem exists in the lower reaches, where the trees and the blockage to the flow of water, should the rain come, exists currently. And that the evidence of this is the attempt to do a quick clean of sections of the gully just under the bridge, which was welcome and it probably helped. But that the bigger problem, Prime Minister, exists with the broken protective wall, the floors of the gully, and the severe blockage going into the Hornsby. Prime Minister, I heard you again because you said more hurricanes will be coming, and we may have escaped it this time, but we may not be lucky next time. We need to address this as a matter of urgency. It's undermining people's houses. It has broken the banks of the gully and undermining people's houses and threatening different communities on both sides of the gully. Prime Minister, you're well aware of the problem, well aware of it. I'm asking that that be done. A similar thing is in New Haven. New Haven is a constant situation. And we have made some community efforts, and I'm seeking the assistance to address what's something that can be addressed to alleviate what is a clear and present danger in the New Haven community. So those two things, Prime Minister, I'm asking for some focused attention. Yeah.
Member from Clarendon Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your statement earlier in the House. Just to be clear, Prime Minister, that the impact of Tropical Storm Beryl was not restricted to just southeast Clarendon, but all of southern Clarendon. In fact, I'm not surprised that when that tour was being held in southeast, none was held in southwest because you could not access southwest at that time through Ali Bridge at all, because there are a number of critical infrastructures in the constituency that were significantly impacted. So the Ali Bridge, let's start with that one. Recently, the NWA did some work on the Ali Bridge. When I saw them doing the work, I questioned whether or not the method of construction or repairs made any sense. I was not surprised, therefore, when I went on the morning after Beryl and saw that the very same area that they concreted, right? The water came underneath from the other side and started to lift it up. So if we have 2 or 3 more floodings, Ali Bridge again will be impossible. You came to the constituency recently, so you're familiar with the area. Race course, decimated. Banks, Sedge Pond, Milk River. I don't know if the Minister of Education is aware, but Milk River Primary School lost the roof. Rest Primary School in Milk River, their roof is damaged. The Minister of National Security can tell that Race Course, Exeter Police Station lost their roof. And we have come a far way in that area in terms of the crime-fighting initiative. Because we have been at a stage where murders were rampant. We have gotten it down. So these are the critical infrastructures that need to be addressed expeditiously so that there can be some semblance of normalcy that is brought back to. There's no, it doesn't surprise me that the area doesn't have water, because most of the water for southern Clarendon comes from the Chemsil facility. Chemsil pumping facility, of course, is out because there are a number of light poles that are down. I sent a picture to the minister in charge of energy yesterday just to show him the impact of the fallen poles on the corridor between Alley and Water Lane. We were promised that the JPS would be mobilized because up until this morning, only vehicles below 10 feet could access Water Lane through Alley because the light poles and wires were all across the place. People had to drive on the light wires, drive beneath the light wires, etc. So I am aware that the JPS is in the area now, but this leads me to my other question. Are we saying that on the 13th of July, Saturday, that southern Clarendon power will be restored? That is based on your presentation earlier. That would be very good news for us. But I must treat that announcement with some degree of skepticism because of what I know is present on the ground and the fact that we know that many of these first responders have not been there on the ground. The response from the Ministry of Labour, Maypen office is woefully inadequate. I can say that right now, that I am not pleased with how the Ministry of Labour, Maypen office is being run, and I am not pleased with what I am seeing from them, especially as it relates to southwestern Clarendon. I got a call from the media before I came into Parliament saying, how is it that nobody has said anything? Because they're there now and they're seeing the devastation. Apart from the houses that have lost their roof, we're not talking about that. Just the critical infrastructures, the schools, the police station, the bridge. There's no water. How soon can we expect the NWC, these are paying customers, to start mobilizing to distribute water? Because the funny thing is, from central Clarendon, Maypen, back to northern Clarendon, it seems as if Beryl never really had made an impact there. But from you reach the southern section of the parish, yes, all along that coast, around Race Course, Milk River to Farka Beach, banks, there was a project announced for banks some months ago, some time ago. We had a tour. That bridge that we looked at completely washed away. So that beach that we went to, Minister Mackenzie, we can't reach that beach again. That bridge washed away. Yeah, and you should remember that bridge is right at the corner. So these are the type of things we're dealing with down there. And so it is important that we get an update as it relates to the water delivery, how soon we can get water delivered. We're making arrangements to deliver water, but NWC must step up. Can't be about private interests alone. I mean, commendations must be given to the Royal Navy Group because they have a facility in the constituency, that's the New Yarmouth facility. And they have reached out to me as MP and they have made available food packages, generators for some communities. So we're not saying that the corporate players have not stepped up. So we have to commend them. But the government and the government agencies need to step up as well. Because it can't be about our private resources stepping up. So, Water Commission, let us see how best we can get water to the area. Will we get light by the 13th? I need a definitive answer on that because I don't know. I commend the presentation about the fact that there's poor construction that has led to many of the loss of houses and roofs, etc. Because I too noticed that there are no J-bolts and there are no hurricane straps. And so in putting together a plan to help them, I said to them, mandatory, you have to buy some straps. So I said to the hardware, just provide some straps to them as well. If they don't want to use it, that's their problem. But we need to ensure that we insist, when we're doing these interventions, that we do right, do what we know is right, that we insist that they get them and put them on the buildings. So these are the issues we're facing, Prime Minister. I mean, it's all across Jamaica. And it is very difficult for the residents there now. Many of them are just able today to get messages out to their families. Just today to get messages out to their families. I'm just getting images now that I should have gotten from Thursday, but couldn't have been sent off because of what you explained earlier. The connectivity issues that is as a result of characters who are pillaging the system. If it wasn't for me, let me tell you straight up, if it wasn't for me, I went there on Thursday morning and I was the one who had to bring a team from outside of the area to get into the area. That's how bad it was on Thursday morning, right? And most of the residents are aware of it. But Prime Minister, let me tell you, we have to have these agencies that are under the control and care of the government step up and provide the intervention that is necessary. Thank you.
St. Catherine Eastern, member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, I am certain you're going to be in agreement with me as we both come from Spanish Town. And I remembered very clearly when I was when we were on Zoom, and I said to you that Burke Road is going to be a serious issue. And at the end of it, the hospital, Spanish Town Hospital, was flooded. I was told, and I do not want to say that the officer is not getting information, but I do not know if it is something that is on the spot. Because the drainage, and you would know, Prime Minister, that it has outgrown the town of Spanish Town. There is no drainage there. Starting from Burke Road, Adelaide Street, Young Street, everywhere in Spanish Town can create serious catastrophe if there is any kind of serious flooding in this country. It is very, very serious. And I'm saying to you, Prime Minister, that a serious look must be taken of Spanish Town if we are going to preserve the history of Spanish Town. And we know that it is literally a town that is well used almost by every other parishes in and around. And nothing has been done to Spanish Town to really give it a good boost. Spanish Town Hospital, as we speak, is in a very serious position if there comes any more rain within the next month. And this concrete thing that I heard about falling into drain when nobody couldn't see, I don't buy into that. Because you can use your eyes to see. If you go out there now, Prime Minister, you would realize that starting from LOJ's shopping center, where that drain leads straight down to Port Henderson Road and all those areas, is totally in a deplorable condition. $1 million in my constituency, sharing up between Windsor Heights, Central Village, giving 200,000 or 100,000 a year, cannot touch not even the surface. And if we are serious about mitigation, we have to make sure that we do the right thing. And I heard my colleague just said, and I'm not going to say that the agency is not aware. I don't think they have first-hand knowledge. Time come for them to have first-hand knowledge. They are experts. Most of these heads of agencies are expert in their own fields and rights. They need to put on their boots and they need to go out there with the engineers to see exactly what is happening. And last, because I do not want to keep up your time, the $5 million that has been announced, a lot of people believe that it is at home. And they are preparing to come home for it because they are getting very, very, very eager now that nothing is being spent. We are now hearing about another additional $4 million. And I want to thank you, even though I know it is going to be not woefully inadequate, but for us to do something worthwhile, it can really, it's not going to be enough. But I know you will do better the next time around. But Prime Minister, let us be very clear coming out here this evening. Very clear what is going to happen to the first $5 million, when we are going to get it, because some of the creditors, some people are very lucky to go to some big place to get credits. Some of us not getting any credit. We have to know where the money is coming from. Well, yes, we are not as fortunate. It's not all of us fortunate. So I'm asking you, Prime Minister, give us a date. Give us some time. So we're going to get $5 million by weekend. That means I can start, the creditor will hear you in here, and they will credit me at that time. So, Prime Minister, please, give us some clearer answers. Thank you.
Member of Manchester Northwest.
Prime Minister, I mean, I'm going to just pick up where my colleague left off. Because, you know, it's always good to make the announcements
but at the same time, when the funds don't flow as efficiently as the announcement, it causes problems. Because even though I may not be on the coast side, but the hilly section of northwest Manchester, especially that section overlooking St. Elizabeth, was damaged by wind. Many of the houses got damaged. And northwest Manchester is a constituency that is highly dependent on agriculture. That's the only industries we have. So once the announcement was made prior to the hurricane, constituents expect us to respond right away after the hurricane. And, you know, like my colleague, I'm very cautious in having any credits when the money has not yet arrived at the agency which has responsibility for spending those resources on behalf of our constituents. So a little urgency where that is concerned, so that we can then quickly respond to our constituents. But also on the issue of the government agencies. What I see happening, Prime Minister, is that when there is no catastrophe or any hurricane or any event like this, many of these agencies are still short-staffed. And when you have an event like Beryl, there's no additional staff to take on the additional work that is brought on by this emergency. And I think that because of that, many of the tasks that they have taken on has become, I would say that they're dragging along, because just today, while on my way to Parliament, getting a call from an agency about two shelters in my own constituencies that are still open, that there's no food there to provide for the residents that are there. And they don't have the capacity to provide these foods. And as Member of Parliament asking me, when yet still I have not gotten the resources that has been committed to the constituency, which makes it a little bit difficult. The one social worker per constituency to deal with many of the issues that many of us are facing. We would at least make the request that there are more social workers out there, especially for those who are on the path, the elderly, that many of those the disabled, and many of those whose roofs that we can't even reach to. I mean, we are one individual, one person. So, and our constituents expect us to visit every single home, which is just not possible in a short space of time since the hurricane, and especially in the rural areas. I would say probably only 1% of my constituency has gotten back electricity, and that is the area closer to Mandeville itself. And while sitting here, I got a request from the police if we could provide a generator for the Cottage police station, because I don't think that they will be getting back light by the 13th, as you have somewhat committed that most would have gotten back light. But that's the only police station in northwest Manchester. It is the largest policing area in Jamaica by square miles for that police station. My response to the senior officer who made the request is that I still have not gotten any resources as yet. And I would plead to the Prime Minister, since I'm in Parliament, if something could be done to assist the Cottage police station. The issue of farm roads, I hope that, because that is an issue, especially in constituencies like mine. The Minister of Agriculture is here. I know he would be in a similar situation, because I'm an agriculture dependent, and the Minister knows my constituency and how dependent we are on agriculture, but many of the farm roads have been damaged by the rainwaters. And this gives us an opportunity, Prime Minister, because what has been budgeted for farm roads doesn't take into consideration proper drainage for those farm roads. So I'm pleading that whenever there's an additional budget to deal with farm roads, that drainage, and because of that, many of them, you don't even need a rainfall like this for damage to be done on them. But if it is that we're looking for, as you keep repeating, how it is that we protect the economy itself, it is by doing the job right the first time. So I hope to hear something on the farm roads, but also, as soon as possible, the response to farmers.
Said before about the distribution of it and how it gets to us and all of that. I have a couple of questions, though, Prime Minister. You did mention when you were talking about some collaboration between the local authorities and some other agencies in terms of clearing of the area, national cleanup. But before you went to national cleanup, you included in that 4 million clearing of areas as one of the activities that we could do. So the question I'm asking, right, is for clarity, because in the constituency now, we have a number of downed trees resting on fences, houses, that will take some resources to be able to cut those up and cart them away. But we don't have sufficient resources to actually do the cleaning up when you put them out. So I wanted to know if there was going to be some kind of joined up nature between those two activities and how you were seeing that. So that's one. I didn't hear outside of that, though, any details about the additional resources to the local authorities in terms of the role that they have to play, whether it is through the Poor Relief Department, Board of Health. I know they're collaborating as well with Ministry of Health. But I speak also because the councillors have been saying that they don't have any additional resources, additional resources that they can rely on to be able to also respond. Yeah? So I wanted to place that so you could answer. The other question now, Prime Minister, is really around transparency. So you have spoken about it, and I think we all agree, certainly when you said that all of us here clapped, and we want to make sure that the distribution, the relief is done in a transparent way. I believe I have not heard sufficient from you about that. One is about how we, as members of Parliament, operate in a transparent manner so that it's not done it can be seen as a partisan activity. That's one side of it. But even for Ministry of Labour, for example, and any other agency that is distributing relief, I believe it's important for us to have a level of transparency that allows the public, one, to know how and who to contact. For example, let's say they don't want to go to any member of Parliament because they don't want anybody to believe that they are political and they want to maintain that independence. is there, what agency, what number, who do they go to? I think we need to have that information out there. Also, in terms of, you spoke about 5,000 packages to date would have been delivered to the Ministry of Social Security, for example. Where is there a web on the Ministry of Labor website, or where? How do people look and say 5,000 packages have been distributed? How were they distributed? Where were they distributed? Because I believe to ensure that we have confidence in the system and what we're doing, it is important for individuals to be able to go back and look and say, oh yes, these are the areas that I know to be most affected, and that is where I see most of the resources going. So I am very concerned about that. And those are my few questions.
Let me say I agree with you totally that there has to be greater transparency in how the Ministry of Labor and Security goes about the distribution, because it is not usually seen happening, but it is, based upon the reports that I am privy to. But the public sometimes does not see them moving around and actually doing the distribution. And they want to probably keep it that way because for safety reasons, for crowd management reasons, and for privacy reasons, because they are social workers who are trained to respect the privacy of the beneficiary. So they're caught in almost no man's land as to, do we publicize what we do and how we do it? But I do take your point that in a national disaster, we are giving figures and the public looking on has no other means of verifying that this is so. Is it actually happening? And even on this side, members have said the exact thing that you have said, that there needs to be. So yesterday, we called together all the entities involved in relief, and that was indeed a point that was raised. So I will give you some assurance that you will see some difference. The challenge we face is that, to the point made by the member from Northwest Manchester, that the entities are understaffed. You know what, let me not say that. The entities at this time may be short-staffed. Short-staffed because many of the persons who are going to serve the community come from in proximity or live in the community. So they are suffering from the same deprivation of utilities and services to make them functional. So that was a complaint raised in the coordinating meeting yesterday, that they did not have enough persons who could be mobilized. Many of them were stuck, many of them didn't have electricity. So you're seeing a little bit of a difference now because they have started to come out in a little bit more numbers, which is why we have deployed the JDF. So the DART team, in addition to other units, will be assisting in the relief effort. Right? So you will, from that end as well, you will see even greater transparency. I did take note from the member from Southwest Clarendon regarding the parish office. I took a note of it, and I will have words with the minister to ensure that there is even service to you as the member of parliament and your constituents. In terms of funds for local government, there are several other questions about funds. So what I have announced here today would be the overarching framework as to how the relief project will go, and I have given you some insights as to the exact funding that is available, but there are still some areas which we have not filled out as yet because they are heavily dependent on assessments. So for example, I haven't said definitively what we're going to do for agriculture. I know the extension officers are in the field, they are checking, and as soon as the Ministry of Agriculture comes to us to say, here is the cost, then the Minister of Agriculture will advise Parliament and the nation as to how we will respond to the agriculture sector. In terms of, and that will include any response for farm roads. for your yam farmers, your potato farmers, and the fishers as well. So the Minister of Agriculture next week, I'm saying next week, so you have to get them to come in with the assessment for our next sitting. All right, in terms of the time it will take for the CDF funds to be released, I know the member from St. Catherine East, what is it? Eastern St. Catherine, right. You would want me to give you a definitive timeline. I too would like to be able to do so, but at this point I'm not able to. So in the discussion that I've had with the Minister of Finance, we are trying to ensure that the funding gets to CDF so that CDF can pay. So we're working on it. I wouldn't want to tell you which date it is, but it is going to happen because everybody here is putting the same pressure on me to get it done. So it will get done. All right. It might be early next week. It might be early. The question asked by the member from Western St. Andrew, Southwest St. Andrew, regarding the coordination of the cleanup that you may undertake. And just to be clear, I'm not asking members to use the second allocation to do cleanup. But if there is a tree, for example, that has fallen onto someone's home, you can hire a chainsaw to cut that. Now, the cleanup program that we are envisioning would take the debris in the constituency, the bulky waste, and other cleanup material, and cart it away. That's what we're thinking. So I'm not expecting you to, yes, I'm not expecting you to take your cleanup and then take on the expense of carting away. In terms of the Sandy Gully, by my brother, neighboring constituency because we are joined. We share common infrastructure. So I saw the leader of the opposition standing on the banks of the Jew Gully and pontificating about but we understand. And so the Sandy Gully, by the way, the Jew Gully and all the other gullies are tributaries of the Sandy Gully. The Sandy Gully is in a risky state right now. It's the oldest gully network in Jamaica, built in the 50s. It has reached its useful life. And without question, remember, the gully is carrying more water capacity than it was actually it's a huge gully. But if you look at the capacity and the speed that this carrying water at, you will begin to appreciate that it is at risk. The inverts are at risk. The walls are at risk. So we did spend significant resources in 2011, I believe, in 2010, 2011, to rehabilitate, no, your side as well, to rehabilitate all the way down. At that time, about $700 million. We are going to have to undertake another massive rehabilitation. And I agree with you, not from the top. So it wouldn't be affecting, say, like Minister Clark's area. But it would affect your area where you have mentioned the issues of the cleanup around that river, that area which is escaping me now. But it is something that the NWA has on its agenda, and I constantly pay attention to it, and I give you the undertaking that we will have to address the Sandy Gully. It affects my constituency, it affects your constituency, and if anything were to happen, there are thousands of people who live on the gully bank, and their homes and lives would be at risk. So it will be addressed. In terms, and Father Ramkisoon can be assured that we would not stand by and allow anything to happen to the facilities there. So that will also be addressed. That breakaway will also be addressed. In terms of the issues raised by the member from Northwest and the member from Southwest Clarendon, the undertaking of Saturday the 13th is an undertaking given by the JPS. It's not my undertaking. I too would be skeptical based upon what I saw. But the JPS is very resourceful in terms of their linesmen and other crew, and they work very fast. I must tell you, they work very quickly. They have the stocks in place, which is 50% of the problem. The other, let's say 25% of the problem is the ability to access. And we have sorted out this access issue between themselves and the NWA. So you're going to see some swift movement in your area, in St. Elizabeth, and those areas as well. But you are going to see some movements, I would say, by Friday in those areas. In terms of the Alley Bridge and those areas that you have mentioned, member, I will have words with the NWA to see what we can do to start repairs or replacement, because I know that is cutting off an entire area. All right. In terms of the police, in terms of the generators, I'm going to, the Minister of National Security is undertaking to pay some attention to see if we can get some generating independent backup capacity there. Right, so I was saying that in the treatment of the Sandy Gully, we would also put some resources for New Haven. New Haven is a perennial problem, as we know. But as you mentioned it, I'm fearful of going on to these topics because it draws up. But the truth is that as we look at some areas in Clarendon, as we look at some areas in St. Elizabeth and in New Haven, when we enter the reconstruction phase, there has to be some relocation. There's no question about it. There has to be some relocation. I don't want to bring it up here yet because exactly, we need to put a full plan to the country so that the persons who would be required to relocate understand that it will be done with equity and justice and that they will not be made any worse off. But I don't want to go into that right now. But I thank the members for the questions, and at the next sitting, I will provide the nation with a more fulsome report.